In small towns where secrets linger like gunsmoke, violence haunts men long after they've buried their guns. Some outlaws hide behind aprons and clean glasses, believing the past can be washed away as easily as whiskey stains, until strangers arrive who recognize the killer's hands beneath a bartender's careful pour. When your history is written in blood, redemption is just the calm before the storm. The Copper Crown Saloon stood at the edge of Redemption Valley like a weathered monument to better days. From the outside, it resembled countless other frontier watering holes, splintered wooden siding bleached by relentless sun, a hand-painted sign swinging from rusted chains, and windows clouded by decades of dust storms and cigarette smoke. A hitching post that hadn't seen a horse in 20 years stood sentinel beside a gravel parking lot where pickup trucks now rested in uneven rows. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But beneath its unremarkable exterior, the saloon served a more intricate purpose in the valley's quiet ecosystem. It was where miners celebrated paychecks and cowboys drowned sorrows, where business deals were sealed with handshakes instead of contracts, and where, if certain whispers held truth, money sometimes changed hands that never found its way onto any ledger or tax form. Thomas Cole had been tending bar at the Copper Crown for 6 years now, each day adding another careful layer to his meticulously constructed ordinary life. At 43, he moved with the kind of coiled readiness that he disguised as casual confidence, a presence that made troublemakers reconsider their intentions without him ever raising his voice. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, his face weathered but clean-shaven, his clothes simple but immaculate. Nothing about him suggested he'd ever been anything other than what he appeared to be. Just another small-town bartender trying to make an honest living in a place the modern world had largely forgotten. The locals valued him because he remembered their orders and kept their confidences. Sheriff Halstead appreciated how trouble seemed to dissolve before it required his intervention. And Eleanor Jenkins, the saloon's aging owner, treasured him because business had never been better since Thomas started pouring drinks and keeping her books. On this particular Tuesday evening, Thomas was moving through his familiar routine, polishing glasses that already gleamed, arranging bottles in perfect alignment, and keeping a watchful eye on the growing crowd. The regulars had claimed their usual territories. Mac Wilson hunched over the corner table, nursing the same glass of whiskey for 3 hours. The Crawford brothers occupying the pool table despite their legendary inability to sink a shot, and the after-shift workers from the Blackridge mine still in their dust-covered clothes, spending wages still warm from the paymaster's hands. The saloon's weathered door swung open, letting in a gust of desert air along with Eleanor Jenkins. Thomas noticed immediately that something was off about his employer's demeanor. Eleanor's shoulders were unnaturally rigid, her eyes darting around the room before settling on the back office, where they kept the safe. "Pour me something strong, Thomas," Eleanor muttered, sliding onto her usual stool at the quiet end of the bar. "The good stuff you hide under the counter." Before Thomas could reach for the bottle of small-batch bourbon he reserved for Eleanor's bad days, a group near the jukebox raised their glasses. "To Jesse!" they called out, a toast that sent a visible tremor through Eleanor's frame. 8 years, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. 8 years since Jesse Jenkins disappeared into the hills, and they still drink to my husband like he's going to walk through that door someday. Thomas poured Eleanor's drink with practiced precision, his face revealing nothing. Some folks need their rituals, Ellie. Helps them make sense of things they can't understand. And what about you, Thomas? Eleanor's eyes carried a weight that suggested she wasn't just making conversation. What helps you make sense of things? Thomas was saved from answering by the arrival of 3 strangers. They moved differently from the usual customers. Too alert, too controlled. The leader wore expensive lizard skin boots that had never seen a day of honest ranch work. His companion kept checking an antique pocket watch, while the third scanned the room with too much interest in the exit signs. "Evening, gentlemen." Thomas greeted them with professional courtesy, noting how they positioned themselves, one near the front door, one with a clear view of the back exit, and their leader settling at the bar within arm's reach of where Mac Wilson sat with his eternal whiskey. "Bourbon," the leader ordered, his accent suggesting he'd never been within 500 miles of Redemption Valley before today. "Your best." As Thomas prepared their drinks, he noticed something peculiar about the second man's pocket watch. Its hands appeared to be frozen at 10:13. It was the kind of detail most people would overlook, but Thomas had spent years of his life noticing things others missed. It had kept him alive back when he ran with a different crowd in a different life. The night progressed with an undercurrent of tension that only Thomas seemed to notice. Mac Wilson finally abandoned his whiskey around 10, leaving behind his usual crumpled 20 that they both knew wasn't just for the single drink. Eleanor disappeared into her office, allegedly to balance the till, though the sound of her nervous pacing carried through the thin walls. The three strangers remained, nursing their drinks and watching. Just watching. Thomas continued his closing. Routine, every movement calculated and smooth, while his mind raced through possibilities and contingencies. He'd been on both sides of what was about to happen, though that was something Thomas Cole, respectable bartender of 6 years, wasn't supposed to know anything about. When Watch Checker approached the bar for one final bourbon, Thomas saw the two men move into position through the reflection in the mirror behind the liquor bottles, one by the back door, one by the front. Classic triangle formation. Professional. Thomas's hand hovered over the bourbon bottle for a fraction of a second, as 15 years of survival instincts warred with 6 years of careful cover. The question wasn't whether something was about to happen, it was whether he could afford to show that he knew exactly what was coming. Lily, the young waitress, caught Thomas's eye from across the room. The college student had worked at the Copper Crown longer than most seasonal help, and she too seemed to sense something was off. Her hand dropped to the small of her back, where Thomas knew she kept a canister of pepper spray after an incident. With a handsy customer last summer, Thomas gave her an almost imperceptible shake of the head. If trouble was coming, the last thing they needed was Lily trying to play hero. Through the front windows, Thomas caught glimpses of movement in the parking lot, more shadows than there should be, moving with too much purpose for casual drinkers. He thought of the cash stored in the hollow space beneath the floorboards of Eleanor's office, this month's profit plus the investment from that businessman from Las Vegas, the one whose name never appeared in any paperwork. Eleanor had warned him when he took the job that some questions were better left unasked, some details better left unknown. But Thomas had recognized the look in Eleanor's eyes that day. The same desperate look he'd seen in countless others during his previous life. The look of someone trapped in something too big to escape alone. It was that look, more than anything else, that had made Thomas stay. That, and the need for a quiet place to disappear into. Now, as he reached for the bourbon bottle, Thomas wondered if his past had finally caught up with him, or if this was just another test of Thomas Cole's carefully constructed new life. Morning sun painted Redemption Valley's main street in deceptively peaceful shades of amber and gold. Thomas's routine started long before his shift at the Copper Crown, beginning with a 5-mile run through the desert trails regardless of temperature. Old habits died hard, and staying sharp had kept him alive long enough to need new habits in the first place. He'd learned years ago that routines could save your life, or end it if you weren't careful about who was watching them. This morning, something felt off even before his run began. He'd noticed the black pickup with darkened windows, parked a half-mile down from his modest cabin, engine idling despite the early hour. It was the same vehicle he'd seen circling the Copper Crown the night before, making 3 passes before disappearing into the darkness beyond the valley's rim. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Thomas had catalogued every detail. Arizona plates less than a month old, a distinctive dent in the driver's side door that had been recently repaired with body filler, but not yet painted. He took a different route than usual, cutting through the dry riverbed and doubling back twice to confirm his suspicions. The pickup followed at a distance, amateur work that made Thomas almost miss the professionals who used to hunt him. Almost as he rounded the bend past Miller's General Store, he heard a commotion in the narrow alley between the buildings. A group of teenagers had cornered something, their laughter carrying an edge that made Thomas's jaw tighten. He recognized 2 of them, the Carson boys, whose father ran the local pawn shop and asked too few questions about where things came from. Just keep moving, he told himself, maintaining his pace. Not your problem. Then he heard the yelp, pained, desperate and defiant all at once. Before he could reconsider, Thomas was already moving toward the alley. The teenagers scattered at his approach, their bravado evaporating at the sight of an adult. The Carson boys hesitated just long enough to shoot him defiant looks, reminding Thomas of other young predators he'd known, the ones who usually ended up in unmarked graves before they could legally buy a drink. Behind a stack of wooden pallets, he found what had drawn their attention, a red Australian cattle dog, probably 2 or 3 years old, with one ear torn and a makeshift rope collar that had clearly seen better days. The dog's intelligent eyes tracked his every movement, reminding him of people he'd known in his previous life, people who'd learned the hard way not to trust easily. Easy now, Thomas said softly, crouching down to appear less threatening. Not going to hurt you. The dog growled weakly, backing further into the corner. Thomas noticed it was favoring its left front paw, and a fresh cut above one eye suggested the teenagers had been throwing rocks. Older scars beneath the dog's rough coat told a longer story of hard living. Thomas reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out the beef jerky he kept for his longer runs. The movement caused the dog to bare its teeth, but there was more fear than aggression in the gesture. Thomas recognized the look. He'd seen it in mirrors often enough during his first years on the run. "Your call," he told the dog, placing a piece of jerky on the ground before backing away. The cattle dog's nose twitched, but it didn't move. Thomas waited, time being something he'd learned to use as a tool rather than an enemy. He was about to leave when he noticed the tag on the rough collar, property of Blackridge Security. The company name triggered something in his memory. They'd gone bankrupt last spring after their owner, Frank Cortez, had a mysterious accident, the kind of accident that happened when certain debts went unpaid. Thomas had overheard enough at the bar to piece together that Cortez had been skimming from his clients, including some people who considered theft a personal insult rather than just bad business. "You're a long way from your old job, aren't you?" Thomas muttered. The dog's ears pricked up at his voice, intelligence shining through the fear in its eyes. A door opened further down the alley, and Dr. Maya Rivera stepped out of the back entrance to her veterinary clinic, carrying a bag of trash to the dumpster. She stopped when she saw Thomas and the dog, her expression shifting from surprise to professional assessment. "That's the 4th stray this month," she said, keeping her voice low and calm. "Town's getting overrun since they slashed the animal. Control budget." Thomas had seen Maya around town, but had never spoken to her directly. She was newer to Redemption Valley, having taken over Dr. Harper's practice 3 years ago. There were rumors about why she'd chosen such a small town for her practice, whispers about a lawsuit in Chicago, about a diagnosis missed and a patient lost. But Thomas made it a point not to pay attention to rumors. He had enough of his own. This One's not exactly a stray, Thomas replied, gesturing to the collar. Security dog from the looks of it. Maya moved closer, her movements measured and professional. The dog's growl deepened, but Thomas noticed it lacked the same intensity it had shown toward him initially. Interesting, Maya said. Former security, dog, she corrected, noticing the company name. And from his condition, I'd say he's been on his own for at least a few months. She studied Thomas with the same clinical attention she'd given the dog. Most people would have just walked past. Most people did, Thomas said, standing slowly. Including me. Almost. Maya pulled a business card from her pocket and held it out. Bring him around to the clinic's front entrance. I'll take a look at that paw and the cut above his eye. She paused, her next words carrying a weight that suggested she wasn't just talking about the dog. Sometimes the strays that find us are the ones that need us most. Thomas looked at the card, then at the dog, then back at Maya. I'm not really looking for... A good thing I didn't ask you to adopt him, Maya interrupted, with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Just bring him in, unless you have somewhere more important to be. The question carried no judgment, but something in her tone made Thomas think of Eleanor's words from the night before. Some folks in this town ask too many questions. Others know better. Thomas took the card, watching as Maya returned to her. Clinic. The dog had relaxed slightly during their conversation, its growl subsiding to occasional worried whimpers. He noticed that despite its injuries and obvious abuse, the cattle dog's posture remained alert, its eyes constantly scanning. The alley entrances, a survivor then. Thomas could respect that. As they approached the veterinary clinic 20 minutes and half a pack of jerky later, Thomas noticed the black pickup had reappeared, now parked across the street. The driver's window was cracked just enough to allow cigarette smoke to escape, and Thomas caught the glint of what might have been a camera lens. The dog tensed, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Yeah, Thomas muttered, guiding the cattle dog toward the clinic's entrance. I don't like them either. The veterinary clinic's waiting room smelled of antiseptic and desert dust. Thomas sat on a molded plastic chair, watching through a large observation window as Dr. Rivera examined the cattle dog in the adjacent room. The animal had remained surprisingly calm during their walk to the clinic, limping alongside Thomas as if they'd made some unspoken agreement to trust each other, at least temporarily. His name is Ranger, Maya announced, emerging from the exam room with an electronic scanner in hand. Found his microchip, registered to Blackridge Security, but there's something strange about the registration details. Thomas raised an eyebrow, waiting. He'd learned long ago that silence drew out more information than questions ever could. The chip was registered 2 years ago, Maya continued, but Blackridge Security didn't start operations here until 14 months ago, and the address listed doesn't exist in Redemption Valley. Before Thomas could respond, the clinic's door swung open. Sheriff Halstead walked in, his weathered face tightening when he saw Thomas. Figured I'd find you here, Halstead said. Word travels fast when the quiet bartender starts rescuing dogs in alleys. Maya's posture stiffened slightly. Sheriff, I wasn't aware you had an animal needing attention. Just checking on our resident Good Samaritan, Halstead replied, his tone carefully neutral. Thomas, we need to discuss what happened at the saloon last night. Heard there was some unusual activity after closing. Thomas recognized the code. Something had gone wrong with the money drop, but Halstead's presence here in person suggested it was worse than just a scheduling issue. I'll need about 20 minutes to finish up here, Thomas replied, watching. Halstead's reaction. The sheriff's right hand twitched toward his holster, then settled, their signal for immediate trouble brewing. I can keep Ranger here for observation, Maya offered, misreading the tension. He's dehydrated, and that paw needs proper treatment. Plus, I'm curious about this microchip situation. Ranger? Halstead's voice carried an edge that made the dog's ears flatten. Fitting name for something that shows up out of nowhere, wouldn't you say, Thomas? Thomas stood slowly, maintaining his casual demeanor despite the warning bells clanging in his head. Halstead never took risks like this, coming to find him in public, dropping hints about their arrangement. Something had the sheriff rattled. "The bill's on me," Thomas told Meyer, reaching for his wallet. "Consider it community service." Meyer waved him off. "Let's wait and see if anyone claims him first. Though given what happened to Blackridge Security, I'm not holding my breath." "What do you mean?" Thomas asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Their owner, Frank Cortez, disappeared last spring. His truck was found abandoned at the old silver mine, but no sign of him. His wife says he was acting strange the week before, nervous, always looking over his shoulder. Said he'd mentioned something about running security for people who didn't tolerate mistakes." Halstead's face had gone pale. "Unfortunate business. That, Thomas, we really need to—" The clinic's door opened again. A man in an expensive suit walked in, his shoes too polished for Redemption Valley's perpetual dust. Thomas noticed the slight bulge under his left arm, a shoulder holster, professionally concealed. "Dr. Rivera," the man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Agent Dominic Reeves, Bureau of Land Management. I believe you used to work at Northwest Regional Hospital in Seattle." Meyer's face drained of color. "That was a long time ago. We're closed for lunch now, if you could come back—" "Actually," Reeves interrupted smoothly, "I'm here about the dog. Word travels fast in small towns, doesn't it, Sheriff?" Halstead's hand drifted closer to his service weapon. "Thomas, that discussion can wait." "I think it can," Thomas finished, moving subtly to position himself between Meyer and Reeves. "Dr. Rivera is right. The clinic's closed for lunch." Reeves's smile widened. "Interesting. The bartender rescues a security dog that belonged to a man who vanished, the vet with a complicated past, and the sheriff who's been making some interesting notations in the county's asset forfeiture records." He reached into his jacket, causing everyone to tense, but withdrew only a business card. "When you're ready to discuss the real reason I'm in Redemption Valley, call this number." He placed the card on the counter and left, the bell's cheerful chime at odds with the heavy silence he left behind. Ranger growled softly from the exam room, and Thomas noticed something he'd missed before. On the dog's collar, partially hidden by matted fur, was a small metal tag. Not the official Blackridge security tag, but something custom-made. The numbers stamped into it matched the time on the frozen pocket watch he'd noticed on one of the strangers at the saloon the night before. 10:13. "Meyer," Thomas said carefully, "I think you should close the clinic early today, and maybe stay somewhere other than your house tonight. You don't know what you're getting into," Halstead warned, but his voice lacked conviction. Thomas thought about the black pickup outside, about Agent Reeves's too-perfect suit, about the way Ranger had gone from fearful to protective in the span of an hour. "No," he replied, watching Meyer gather her things with shaking hands. "But I'm starting to think I know exactly what I walked away from 12 years ago. And now it's followed me here." Halstead's phone buzzed, a text message that made him curse under his breath. "3 men just walked into the Copper Crown. They're asking for you, Thomas, by your old name." Ranger limped over to Thomas's side, pressing against his leg with unexpected determination. In the dog's alert stance and unwavering focus, Thomas recognized something he hadn't seen in a long time. A partner who understood that sometimes survival meant choosing your battles carefully. "Take Meyer out the back," Thomas told Halstead. "Then get to the saloon and act normal. I'll handle our guests." Meyer started to protest, but he cut her off. "Some questions are better left unasked," he said, echoing Eleanor's words from earlier. "But since they're asking anyway, might as well give them the answers they don't want to hear." The Copper Crown looked different in daylight, smaller, older, its flaws more apparent without the forgiving shadows of evening. As Thomas approached from the west, the sun at his back cast his shadow long across the gravel parking lot. Ranger moved silently beside him, the dog's limp now barely perceptible. Thomas wondered how much of that injury had been real and how much had been performance. The black pickup was nowhere to be seen, but Thomas spotted fresh tire tracks leading behind the saloon. They hadn't left, just repositioned for whatever was coming. 3 motorcycles were parked in front, expensive touring models with out-of-state plates. Not the usual Harleys favored by weekend riders passing through, but sleek machines built for covering long distances quickly and quietly, professional tools for men who considered violence a profession. Thomas paused at the saloon's weathered door, feeling the weight of the Colt 1911 pressed against his lower back. He'd retrieved it from a lockbox hidden beneath the floorboards of his cabin. 12 years of dust, disturbed for a weapon he'd sworn never to carry again. Promises, like identities, sometimes needed adjustment. Through the window, he could see the 3 men from the night before, now positioned around the empty bar with tactical precision. The leader sat facing the door, while his companions had clear sight lines to both exits. In the corner, Lily the waitress was setting up for the afternoon shift, her movements stiff with tension. Eleanor was nowhere to be seen. "Stay," Thomas commanded. "Ranger," but the dog merely looked at him with what could almost be interpreted as amusement. "Fine," Thomas sighed. "But remember, you wanted to come along." He pushed through the door, letting it slam behind him with deliberate force. The sound echoed through the empty saloon like a gunshot, and Thomas saw Lily flinch. The 3 men, however, didn't even blink. Professionals then, the real kind. "The bar doesn't open until 4, Thomas said, his voice carrying the flat certainty of a man who'd given similar warnings in different contexts long ago. "We're not here for the drinks," the leader replied, his accent now unmistakably East Coast. "Though I have to say, you've certainly found yourself a quaint little hiding spot, Mr. Blackwood. Or do you prefer Thomas Cole these days?" The name hit Thomas like a physical blow. A name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in 12 years, a name that belonged to graveyards and old wanted posters, not to a small-town bartender in a forgotten corner of the Southwest. "You have me confused with someone else," Thomas replied, moving behind the bar with practiced ease. The position gave him access to the sawed-off shotgun Eleanor kept mounted beneath the counter, while placing the solid oak bar between himself and his visitors. Ranger slipped silently into the shadows beneath a nearby table, somehow understanding the tactical advantage of remaining unseen. "Confusion isn't something I suffer from," the leader said, standing slowly. "Daniel Blackwood, former enforcer for the Castellano family, disappeared 12 years ago after the Riverside massacre, taking $2 million and a considerable amount of sensitive information with you. Some people thought you were dead. Others," he gestured around the saloon, "clearly thought you might be hiding in plain sight." Thomas's hand rested near the hidden shotgun, but he made no move to grab it. "Not yet. Who are you?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Vincent Conti," the man replied with a slight bow. "I worked for Antonio Castellano back when you did. Junior position, you wouldn't remember me, but I certainly remember you. Everyone remembers the ghost." The nickname sent a chill down Thomas's spine, another relic from a life he'd believed safely buried. "The ghost?" Lily asked from the corner, her voice small but steady. "That's what they called you?" Thomas realized with a sinking feeling that she'd been positioned there deliberately, kept as collateral. His eyes met hers briefly, and he saw not just fear, but also betrayal. Another innocent caught in his wake. "The ghost," Vincent continued, clearly enjoying the moment, because he could get into anywhere, no matter how secure. No lock could stop him, no safe was beyond his skills. And when Antonio needed someone to deliver a permanent message, the ghost would appear, do what was necessary, and vanish. No witnesses, no evidence, just bodies. Thomas kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing through scenarios, calculating angles, mapping escape routes, old habits resurfacing with frightening ease. "Nice story," he said, "but I'm just a bartender." Vincent laughed, the sound hollow and cold in the empty saloon. "A bartender who maintains perfect sightlines to all entrances, who positioned himself behind cover the moment he walked in, who's currently gauging the distance to at least 3 potential weapons within reach." He nodded to his companions, who shifted their positions slightly. Even the dog moved with tactical awareness. "Interesting pet you found, Mr. Blackwood." "If you're here to kill me," Thomas said quietly, "you're not being very efficient about it." "Kill you?" Vincent seemed genuinely surprised. "Why would I kill the man I've spent 5 years tracking down? The man who has something that belongs to the Castellano family? The man who might be the only person alive who knows where Antonio hid his real fortune before the feds closed in?" Thomas's expression didn't change, but his mind stumbled on this new information. Antonio Castellano had been arrested 10 years ago, his criminal empire dismantled by a federal task force. The official story was that most of his assets had been seized, but rumors had always persisted about a hidden reserve, insurance against exactly the kind of downfall that eventually claimed him. "I've been out of that life for 12 years, Thomas said carefully. "Whatever Antonio did after I left, I wouldn't know anything about it." "See, that's where things get interesting," Vincent replied, moving closer to the bar. "Antonio never believed you ran because of the Riverside situation. He always maintained you were setting up his escape plan, that the money and information you took were just the foundation for something bigger." "And now Antonio wants it back?" Thomas asked. Trying to understand the angle, Vincent's smile turned predatory. "Antonio died in federal custody last month. Heart attack, they said. Very convenient timing, since he was scheduled to testify against certain business associates the following week." The pieces were starting to align in Thomas's mind, forming a picture he didn't like. "So who are you working for now, Vincent?" "The future, Mr. Blackwood, and so are you, whether you realize it yet or not." The saloon door opened again, and Sheriff Halstead stepped in, his hand resting casually on his holster. But Thomas could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful calculation in his movements. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Halstead said. "Everything all right in here, Thomas?" Vincent turned smoothly, his smile never wavering. "Sheriff, perfect timing. We were just discussing local history with your bartender here. Fascinating stories about this region." "Redemption Valley doesn't have much history worth discussing," Halstead replied, his eyes flicking to Thomas, then to Lily, then back to Vincent. "Oh, I disagree," Vincent said. "Some histories are just buried deeper than others. Speaking of which, did you know your bartender has quite an extensive background in security work? Specialized in vault systems, high-value asset protection." Halstead's expression remained carefully neutral. "Thomas's employment history isn't any of my concern, as long as he keeps the peace in my town." Of course, Vincent stepped back, gesturing to his companions. "We should be going anyway. Just wanted to extend an invitation to Thomas here. A business proposition from some mutual acquaintances." He placed a black business card on the bar. Unlike Reeves's government issue card from earlier, this one bore only a phone number, embossed in silver. "Our associates will be at the abandoned Blackridge mine tomorrow at midnight. They're very interested in discussing old times and new opportunities. I'd strongly suggest you attend, Mr. Cole." The emphasis on his current name carried an unmistakable threat. "And if I'm not interested in any reunions?" Thomas asked. Vincent's smile never reached his eyes. "Then I'm afraid certain information about Redemption Valley's more interesting business arrangements might find its way to the proper authorities. Or perhaps He glanced meaningfully at Lily, then toward the back office where Eleanor was presumably hiding. There might be unfortunate accidents. This is dangerous country after all. People go missing in the desert all the time. Ranger emerged. From beneath the table, a low growl building in his throat as he positioned himself protectively between Lily and the strangers. Vincent seemed untroubled by the dog's display. Interesting how quickly animals can form attachments. Humans too, for that matter, makes them so vulnerable. Thomas's hand had moved imperceptibly closer to the hidden shotgun. "You've delivered your message. Now get out of my bar." "Your bar?" Vincent raised an eyebrow. "I thought it belonged to Eleanor Jenkins, though I suppose ownership is a fluid concept in your line of work." He nodded to his companions, and they moved toward the door with practiced coordination. Vincent paused at the threshold, looking back with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "Just one question, Ghost. After everything you did, all the blood on your hands, how do you sleep at night, pretending to be just another honest citizen?" Thomas met his gaze steadily, with one eye open, always. Vincent's laugh followed him out the door, and moments later, the sound of motorcycle engines faded into the distance. The silence that followed seemed to pulse with unanswered questions. Halstead moved to check on Lily, who was visibly shaking. Now that the immediate threat had passed, Ranger returned to Thomas's side, pressing against his leg as if offering silent support. "They were waiting here when I arrived," Lily said, her voice steadier than Thomas would have expected. "They knew my name, Thomas. They knew where I live, where my sister works. They said—" She faltered. "They said I should ask you about Riverside, about what really happened there." Halstead's expression had hardened. "Thomas, I think it's time you told us exactly what kind of trouble just walked into our town." The office door opened, and Eleanor emerged, her face pale but composed. Unlike Lily, she didn't seem shocked by the revelations about Thomas's past, only grim, as if long-held suspicions had finally been confirmed. "It's not just about him, is it?" she asked, looking directly at Halstead. "This connects to what Jesse was involved in, to why he disappeared." Thomas looked between them, seeing the outlines of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed. All this time, he'd thought he was the only one in Redemption Valley with dangerous secrets. "We need to talk," he said finally. "All of us. But not here." He picked up Vincent's black card, studying the embossed number. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to find me. The question is, do they want what I took 12 years ago, or is this about something bigger?" "Like what?" Lily asked, her earlier fear now tempered with determination that reminded Thomas why she'd survived working in a frontier bar since she was 18. Thomas glanced at Ranger, at the mysterious 1013 tag that matched the frozen watch. At Sheriff, Halstead's carefully neutral expression, at Eleanor's knowing eyes. Like the fact that Frank Cortez and his security company were working for the same people who employed me years ago, he said slowly, the connections forming as he spoke. Like the fact that the Black Ridge mine and the money passing through this bar might be connected to something much larger than just local corruption. And like the fact that Vincent Conti isn't just here for me, he's setting the stage for something bigger. Ranger's ears perked up suddenly, seconds before they all heard vehicles approaching outside, multiple engines, moving with purpose. "We need to go," Thomas said, his decision made. "Now, through the back." "Go where?" Eleanor asked, already moving. "Toward the office and the exit beyond." Thomas checked his weapon, the familiar weight of the 1911 both comforting and damning. To see a vet about a dog's microchip, and then to figure out why a dead mob boss thinks I'm holding his missing millions. As they slipped out the back door of the Copper Crown, Thomas caught the glint of sunlight on metal in the hills overlooking the town, the unmistakable reflection of a rifle scope watching their escape. The ghost might have remained hidden for 12 years, but his shadows had finally caught up with him. And in Redemption Valley, shadows had a way of turning deadly in the harsh desert sun. The abandoned Blackridge mine cast jagged shadows across the desert floor as the sun began its descent behind the western mountains. Once the economic heart of Redemption Valley, the mine now stood as a rusted monument to broken promises and vanished prosperity. Chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire and adorned with faded no trespassing signs encircled the property, a half-hearted attempt to keep out curiosity seekers and local teenagers. Thomas studied the compound from a ridge a quarter-mile away, the powerful binoculars revealing details invisible to the naked eye. Ranger lay beside him, perfectly still except for his eyes, which tracked the same movements Thomas was cataloguing. 3 men at the main entrance, Thomas murmured. 2 more patrolling the perimeter. Professional setup, not local talent. Behind him, Sheriff Halstead shifted uncomfortably. This is way beyond what we expected. These aren't just Vincent's people. This looks military. Private contractors, Thomas corrected, recognizing the tactical positioning, the disciplined movements. Ex-special forces, most likely. Expensive talent. Which brings us back to the question, who exactly is bankrolling this operation? Maya asked, keeping her voice low despite the distance. After the confrontation at the Copper Crown, they had retreated to Maya's clinic, converting the back room into an impromptu command center. Eleanor had joined them there, bringing financial records that shed new light on the money flowing through Redemption Valley. Lily had insisted on coming too. Her initial shock at Thomas's revealed past now hardened into determination. Antonio Castellano might be dead, Eleanor said, but his organization had deep connections. Federal agencies, private security firms, even foreign interests. Jesse discovered some of those links before he disappeared. The revelation that Eleanor's missing husband had been investigating the same shadows now encroaching on Redemption Valley had shifted the dynamics of their small group. This wasn't just about Thomas's past anymore. It was about a conspiracy that had already claimed local victims. The mine makes sense as their base of operations, Thomas said, lowering the binoculars. Remote, defensible, and according to local legend, honeycombed with tunnels that connect to various properties in town. Not just legend, Halstead corrected. County records confirm at least 3 major tunnel systems. One leads directly beneath the courthouse, another connects to the old bank building, and the third runs right under the Copper Crown, Eleanor finished. Jesse mapped it years ago, before he vanished. Said it was his insurance policy. Thomas turned to face them, the pieces of the puzzle shifting into new configurations in his mind. Insurance against what exactly? Eleanor's weathered face showed the weight of secrets kept too long. Against the people who were using Redemption Valley as their personal black site. Jesse called it Operation Ghost Key. The name sent an electric jolt through Thomas. Ghost Key, you're certain that's what he called it? Eleanor nodded solemnly. He said it was because they were looking for a specific key that could unlock something valuable. Something hidden by the ghost, Thomas finished, the implications settling like lead in his stomach. By me. All eyes turned to him, questions hanging in the desert air. The Riverside Massacre 12 years ago, Thomas began, his voice shifting to a tone none of them had heard before, harder, more precise. It wasn't what the papers reported. It wasn't a gang war or a drug deal gone bad. It was an extraction. Extraction of what? Maya asked. Of who? Thomas corrected. A federal witness, high-value asset with information that could have implicated dozens of officials in a corruption scheme stretching from New York to Washington. Antonio Castellano was just the visible face of a much larger organization. And you were sent to, what? Kill this witness? Lily's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Thomas's laugh held no humor. That's what Antonio thought. That's what everyone thought, the ghost sent to silence another loose end. But my real mission came from someone else, someone inside the government who wanted that witness extracted and hidden, along with the evidence he carried. And that evidence is what they think you still have, Halstead said, understanding dawning. The key they've been looking for all these years. Thomas nodded grimly. A key to electronic vaults containing account numbers, transaction records, blackmail material, everything needed to expose an operation that makes Antonio Castellano look like a corner drug dealer. And do you, Maya asked quietly, do you still have this key? Thomas met her gaze steadily. I never had it. The witness did. A man named Gabriel Mercer. I got him out, set him up with a new identity, and walked away. That was the deal. But Antonio thought you took it, Eleanor said, along with his money. The money was Gabriel's exit fee, payment for years of skimming from operations he'd helped manage. Taking it made my disappearance look like a betrayal rather than what it really was. A sanctioned extraction, Halstead finished, professional admiration mixing with wariness in his voice. You were working for someone inside the government. Was I? Thomas's smile was cold. The person who gave me the orders certainly presented themselves that way, but 12 years is a long time to reflect on who might have really been pulling those strings. Ranger's ears suddenly perked up, his body tensing. Seconds later, the distant sound of vehicles reached them, heavy engines moving with purpose toward the mine. Through the binoculars, Thomas watched as a black SUV with tinted windows and 3 unmarked vans approached the main gate. The security personnel snapped to attention, their posture suggesting that whoever had arrived commanded significant authority. Looks like the principal players just showed up for our midnight meeting, Thomas said, handing the binoculars to Halstead. Right on schedule. That's Agent Reeves, Halstead confirmed, adjusting the focus, getting out of the lead SUV, and that's, he faltered, disbelief coloring his words. That's Judge Harmon with him, and Mayor Collins. Thomas wasn't surprised. Local officials are often the easiest to compromise. They control zoning, permits, law enforcement priorities, essential for an operation that needs to stay hidden. What exactly is their operation? Lily asked, the practical question cutting through the revelations. Based on the financial records Jesse collected, Eleanor said, they're using Redemption Valley as a transit point. Money, information, and occasionally people move through here, staying beneath official radar thanks to cooperative local authorities. And now they're expanding, Thomas added. The sudden interest in me, the increased security presence, they're scaling up for something big. Maya, who had been examining the mine through the binoculars, suddenly stiffened. There's someone else arriving. A woman, silver hair, expensive suit. The others are deferring to her. Thomas took back the binoculars, focusing on the new arrival. The woman stood ramrod straight, her bearing military, her sharp features recognizable, even at this distance. Catherine Mercer, he said, the name tasting like ashes in his mouth. Gabriel's wife, the one person I was specifically ordered to leave behind during the extraction. He lowered the binoculars, memories flooding back with painful clarity. She was supposed to be the loose end that would convince Antonio I had betrayed him. Her death was meant to seal my cover story. But you didn't kill her, Maya said, reading the truth in his expression. No, and that mistake has apparently come back to haunt us all. The back room of Maya's clinic felt claustrophobic after the open desert. Maps of Redemption Valley covered one wall, with red markers indicating properties connected to suspected criminal activities. Financial records and property deeds were spread across an examination table, while a laptop displayed satellite imagery of the Black Ridge mine complex. Catherine Mercer didn't just survive, Thomas explained, tracing connections between documents. She thrived. took over her husband's role in the organization, expanded their influence, and apparently never stopped looking for him or for me. But why now? Eleanor asked. After 12 years of silence, why has she suddenly zeroed in on Redemption Valley? Because of Frank Cortez, Halstead said grimly. His security company wasn't just providing local services. According to these contracts, he tapped a stack of papers, they were conducting surveillance throughout the Southwest, looking for specific indicators. Indicators of what? Lily asked. Of Gabriel Mercer, Thomas said. Frank was hunting for signs of a ghost, and instead he found the ghost. Maya leaned forward, her clinical mind assembling the diagnostic pieces. The dog's tag, 1013. That's not just a random number, is it? Thomas shook his head. October 13th was the date of the Riverside operation. Ranger belonged to Frank Cortez, who was using trained dogs as part of his search grid. The tags are probably location identifiers. And when Frank disappeared, Ranger kept doing his job, Lily realized. Kept searching until he found you. Found me, or was programmed to find me, Thomas corrected. That chip Maya found isn't standard pet identification technology. It's military-grade tracking equipment. Which explains why they were so interested in him at the clinic, Maya said. The chip must have activated when it detected your presence, sending a signal back to whoever's monitoring. Ranger, curled in the corner of the room, raised his head. At the mention of his role, his intelligent eyes tracking each speaker. So they've found you, Eleanor said. What do they want? If Gabriel has the key and you never did, what use are you to them now? Thomas's expression darkened. Because I'm the only one who knows where Gabriel Mercer is. I set up his new identity, established his cover, placed him somewhere no one would ever think to look. And they're offering you a choice, Halstead said. Give up Gabriel or watch Redemption Valley burn. They've already started, Eleanor added, pulling out a property record. The bank foreclosed on the Henderson Ranch last month. The Mitchell family's store was shut down for code violations. Small pressures, applied strategically. Softening up the target, Thomas agreed. Standard procedure for an organization preparing to take full control of a location. But why? Redemption Valley, Lily asked. What makes this place so special? Location, Halstead said promptly. We're less than a day's drive from 5 different states, with minimal federal presence and miles of unmonitored desert. And the mine, Eleanor added. According to Jesse's notes, the Black Ridge mine isn't just abandoned. Its deepest levels were converted years ago into some kind of secure facility. Thomas nodded slowly. Old training resurfacing as he assessed the situation with cold precision. A black site, communications equipment, storage vaults, holding cells, probably constructed during the Cold War and maintained off the books ever since. By whom? Maya asked. By whoever Catherine Mercer is really working for, Thomas replied. Because an operation this sophisticated, with this level of resource and reach, isn't just about criminal enterprise. It's about power, the kind that transcends ordinary notions of legal and illegal. The revelation settled heavily over the room. This wasn't just about Thomas's past or a local corruption scheme. They had stumbled onto something much larger and more dangerous. So what do we do? Lily finally asked, her young voice cutting through the tension. We can't just hand over this Gabriel person, and we can't let them take over our town. Despite the gravity of the situation, Thomas felt a flicker of respect for the waitress's courage. She had every reason to walk away from this mess, yet here she was still standing. We have 3 assets they don't know about, he said, moving to the map wall. First, the tunnel system beneath the Copper Crown. If Eleanor's right about where it leads, we have a direct access route into their facility. Second, Halstead continued, catching Thomas's strategic thinking, they believe I'm compromised, just another corrupt local official. They won't expect opposition from the sheriff's department. And third, Maya prompted. Thomas glanced at Ranger, who had risen to his feet, alert and ready. Third, they think I'm here because I've been hiding all these years. They don't realize I've been waiting. Waiting for what? Eleanor asked. Eleanor. For Catherine Mercer to make exactly this move, Thomas said, a predatory smile forming that transformed his face into something none of them had seen before, something that finally showed the ghost beneath the bartender's mask. Because Gabriel didn't just take a key when he disappeared, he left one behind, one that I've been holding all this time. He reached into his pocket and withdrew an antique pocket watch, identical to the one Vincent's companion had carried, but this one was functional, its hands moving steadily forward. When we synchronized our watches before the Riverside operation, Gabriel gave me this, said if anything went wrong, if we got separated, this would be my way back to him. I've kept it with me every day for 12 years, waiting for the moment, when it would be needed. A watch is the key. Lily looked skeptical. Not the watch, Thomas said, carefully opening the case to reveal a small microchip embedded in the inner lid. What's inside it? Coordinates, security codes, dead drop locations, everything needed to find Gabriel Mercer and access the evidence he took with him. But that's exactly what they want, Halstead protested. If you have the key, why not destroy it? Why keep it all these years? Because the evidence Gabriel has isn't just about criminal enterprises, Thomas said quietly. It's about a network that stretches into intelligence agencies, military contractors, financial institutions, a shadow government operating beyond any accountability. The kind of power that doesn't just threaten individuals or towns, but democracies themselves. He replaced the watch in his pocket, his decision already made. I didn't complete my mission 12 years ago. I got Gabriel out, but I never delivered. The evidence he carried to the people who could actually use it. I thought disappearing was enough, that laying low and starting over would keep us both safe. I was wrong. So what's the play? Halstead asked, the lawman deferring to the strategist in their midst. Thomas moved to the map, tracing a route from the clinic to the Copper Crown and from there to the mine complex. Tonight, I show up for Vincent's meeting as requested. I play the role they expect, the cornered fugitive willing to deal to save his own skin. While I'm keeping their attention at the front door, you four will be entering through the back, using the tunnel from the saloon. To do what exactly? Maya asked. We're not exactly a tactical strike team. No, Thomas agreed. But Ranger is trained to track and retrieve. Eleanor knows the tunnel system. Halstead has jurisdiction and firepower. And you, Dr. Rivera, he met her eyes directly, have the medical training to treat Gabriel Mercer. You think he's there, at the mine? Eleanor asked, surprised. I think Catherine Mercer has spent 12 years looking for her husband. Now that she's found the ghost, she'll want both of us in the same place when she springs her trap. She's too strategic not to have contingencies in place. Including having already captured Gabriel, Halstead said, understanding. Thomas nodded, grimly. The woman I glimpsed at the mine wasn't just confident, she was triumphant. She's assembled all the pieces except one. He patted the pocket containing the watch. And tonight, she thinks I'm going to hand over the final piece voluntarily. But, instead, Lily prompted. Thomas's expression hardened into something that made them all finally understand why he had once been feared enough to earn the name Ghost. Instead, we're going to do what I should have done 12 years ago. We're going to expose everything, the black site, the corruption network, Catherine's entire operation. We're going to finish the mission that started at Riverside. As his companions absorbed the magnitude of what he was proposing, Thomas felt a strange lightening in his chest, the weight of a 12-year deception finally lifting. The bartender was falling away, revealing the operative who had never truly disappeared. There's something you should all understand, he said, his voice carrying an authority none of them had heard before. After tonight, Redemption Valley will never be the same, and neither will any of us. You're asking us to risk everything, Eleanor said quietly. Our lives, our town, our futures. I am, Thomas acknowledged without apology. But consider the alternative. If Catherine Mercer successfully establishes this location as her new base of operations, how long before more people disappear, like Frank Cortez? How long before businesses aren't just foreclosed, but burned? How long before Redemption Valley becomes a place where people vanish into the depths of that mine, never to return? His words hung in the air, painting a future none of them could accept. I'm in, Lily said suddenly, her young face set with determination. This is my home too. And mine, Maya added, the doctor's pragmatic nature accepting the diagnosis and moving straight to treatment. Halstead checked his service weapon, a gesture that served as his answer. Eleanor was the last to respond, her eyes lingering on a photograph of her missing husband. Jessie always said there comes a point where keeping secrets does more harm than telling the truth. She nodded firmly. Let's finish what he started. As they began finalizing their plans, Ranger moved to Thomas's side, pressing against his leg. In what seemed like solidarity, Thomas absently scratched the dog's ears, his mind already racing ahead to the confrontation to come. For 12 years, Daniel Blackwood had hidden behind the identity of Thomas Cole, bartender and small-town resident. But tonight, the ghost would walk again, not as the feared enforcer of legend, but as something Catherine Mercer would find far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose, and a mission that had waited 12 years for completion. The sun slipped behind the mountains, casting Redemption Valley into shadow. In Maya's clinic, 5 unlikely allies prepared for battle, while across town, the Copper Crown stood empty, its hidden tunnel awaiting visitors. And beneath the Black Ridge mine, secrets buried for decades stirred in the darkness, ready at last to see the light of day. Midnight in the desert carried a silence so profound it seemed to press against the skin. Thomas stood alone in the Black Ridge, mine's gravel parking area, the glare of security floodlights casting his shadow in multiple directions. Ranger had reluctantly remained behind with the others, a difficult decision, but necessary for the plan to work. The weight of the antique pocket watch felt heavier in Thomas's jacket, its gentle ticking like a countdown to revelation or ruin. He had stripped away the bartender's careful facade, allowing the hardened operative beneath to surface. His posture, his movements, even the cold calculation in his eyes marked him now as the ghost. A name whispered with fear encircles Thomas, had abandoned 12 years ago. The mine's main entrance stood 30 yards ahead, a gaping maw of weathered timber and rusted metal framed by floodlights and guarded by men whose stillness betrayed professional discipline. Behind that entrance lay answers to questions Thomas had carried for over a decade, and if his suspicions were correct, the end point of a mission he had only partially completed. Right on time, Mr. Blackwood. Vincent Conti emerged from the shadows, his expensive suit exchanged for tactical gear that somehow still managed to look tailored. Punctuality was always one of your professional virtues. Cut the reminiscing, Vincent, Thomas replied, his voice carrying the edge that had once made hardened criminals step carefully around him. You said your employer wanted to talk, so let's talk. Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. She's waiting inside. I should warn you, we searched you remotely as you approached. The weapon at your back and the knife in your boot have been noted. You'll be relieved of both before the meeting. I'd be disappointed if you didn't, Thomas replied. In truth, he had counted on the weapons being discovered, their presence and subsequent confiscation part of the carefully constructed impression he needed to create. Vincent gestured toward the entrance, and the guards shifted positions to create a corridor leading into the darkness beyond. After you, Ghost. It's time for your resurrection. Half a mile away, in the cramped back room of the Copper Crown, Eleanor Jenkins pulled aside a massive antique cabinet that had stood against the saloon's rear wall for as long as anyone could remember. Behind it, revealed in the beam of Halstead's flashlight, was a crude wooden door secured with 3 heavy padlocks. Jessie installed these, Eleanor explained, producing a ring of keys from her pocket. Said if anything happened to him, I should use this tunnel only as a last resort. Maya knelt beside Ranger, checking the tactical vest they had improvised for the dog. Multiple pouches contained essential supplies, medical gear, communications equipment, even small packages of the beef jerky that had first earned the animal's trust. How are we even sure this tunnel still connects to the mine? Lily asked, strapping on a utility belt that seemed oversized against her slight frame. It could have collapsed years ago. Jessie maintained it regularly, Eleanor said, as the last padlock fell away. Said it was the town's lifeline if things ever went bad, and he left detailed maps. She unfolded a hand-drawn schematic on a nearby table. The tunnel system was more complex than any of them had imagined, a branching network that extended not just to the mine, but to several other locations throughout Redemption Valley. These weren't just mining tunnels, Halstead observed, studying the map with professional interest. Some of these are newer additions, modern support structures, security features. This was engineered for covert movement. Jessie said they dated back to Prohibition, Eleanor replied. Originally for smuggling liquor, later repurposed during the Cold War. The government contractors who built the mine's deeper levels expanded the network for their own purposes. Which means they might still be monitored, Maya pointed out. Security systems, motion sensors, already considered, Halstead said, producing 4 small devices from his pocket. Signal jammers, military surplus. They'll create enough electronic noise to mask our approach, at least until we're deep enough that the rock does the job for us. As the others prepared to enter the tunnel, Lily stood slightly apart, checking the pepper spray canister she'd insisted on bringing along with the hunting knife borrowed from Halstead. Of all of them, she had the least experience with danger, yet her determination hadn't wavered. You don't have to come, Maya told her gently. Someone should stay behind, be ready to contact outside authorities if things go wrong. Lily's chin lifted. With all due respect, Dr. Rivera, that's bullshit. Thomas stood up for me more times than I can count. Against handsy customers, against town gossips, against my own stepfather when he got mean with drink. I'm not sitting this out. Eleanor squeezed the young woman's shoulder with surprising strength. Jessie would have liked you, girl. He always said courage matters more than experience. The door swung inward with a groan of ancient hinges, revealing a narrow passageway that descended into darkness. The beam of Halstead's tactical flashlight illuminated rough-hewn stone walls, supported by timber bracing that looked older than anyone present. According to the map, it's just over a mile to the junction that connects to the mine's lower levels, Eleanor said, consulting Jessie's notes one final time. From there, we'll need to locate the secure facility Thomas described. And Gabriel Mercer, Maya added, medical kit at the ready. If he's being held there, he may need immediate treatment. Ranger moved to the tunnel entrance, nose testing the stale air, ears alert. The dog's training was evident now. No sign remained of the injured stray they'd found in the alley. This was a precision instrument, honed for exactly the kind of mission they were undertaking. Thomas gives us 30 minutes before he needs backup, Halstead reminded them, checking his watch. That doesn't leave much margin for error. Eleanor took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the tunnel with the confidence of a woman reclaiming something that had been taken from her. Then we'd better not make any errors, Sheriff. One by one, they followed her into the earth, Ranger taking point with Halstead close behind. The darkness swallowed them, the door swinging shut with finality. Behind them, the Copper Crown stood empty, its weathered walls keeping one final secret. The elevator descending into the Black Ridge mine shuddered and groaned, the ancient mechanism protesting its burden. Thomas stood surrounded by 4 armed guards, their weapons held casually, but their eyes never leaving his hands. Vincent leaned against the control panel, affecting nonchalance while remaining coiled for action. 14 levels down, Vincent commented as the numbers flickered past, on the antiquated indicator. Deeper than the original mining operation ever went. Impressive what can be built when money and government contracts flow freely, isn't it? Thomas remained silent, conserving energy and focusing on memorizing their route. The elevator passed. Level 7, then 8, the temperature noticeably dropping with each floor. At level 10, the rough stone walls visible through the cage abruptly gave way to smooth concrete, the transition from mining operation to something altogether different. "We call this the vault," Vincent said, as the elevator finally shuddered to a halt at level 14. Appropriate given what's stored here, and who. The doors slid open to reveal a facility that had no business existing beneath an abandoned mine in a forgotten desert town. Polished concrete floors, recessed lighting, and modern security doors lined a corridor that stretched beyond sight. Armed personnel in tactical gear moved with purpose, their uniforms bearing no insignia, but their bearing unmistakably military. "Welcome to America's shadow," Vincent said, gesturing Thomas forward. "One of many black sites operating beyond congressional oversight, judicial review, or public knowledge. Convenient for certain operations that require discretion." Thomas took careful note of security cameras, airflow vents, emergency exits, the automatic assessment of a man who had spent years planning infiltrations and escapes. The facility was impressive, but not impenetrable. Every stronghold had weaknesses. The deeper they went, the more he would discover. They passed through 3 security checkpoints, each requiring Vincent's biometric authentication. At the 3rd, Thomas was efficiently but thoroughly searched, his weapons confiscated as promised. The guard who took his Colt 1911 examined it with professional appreciation before securing it in a lockbox. "Down here, Ghost, a gun is the least effective weapon you could bring," Vincent remarked, as they continued deeper into the facility. "Information is what matters. Secrets, the kind you've been keeping all these years." They turned a corner, and the corridor opened into a command center filled with monitoring equipment, data servers, and communications arrays. Technicians worked at multiple stations, while armed personnel maintained a perimeter of security. At the center stood a glass-walled conference room, and within it the silver-haired woman Thomas had observed from the ridge. Catherine Mercer hadn't changed as much as Thomas might have expected after 12 years. Her face showed few additional lines. Her posture remained military straight. Her eyes still held the penetrating intelligence that had made her a formidable opponent. She wore an expertly tailored charcoal suit that suggested authority without flamboyance. As Thomas approached, she dismissed the aides surrounding her with a subtle gesture. By the time Vincent escorted him into the conference room, she stood alone, waiting. "Daniel Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of old money and exclusive education. "Or is it Thomas Cole now? So many names for one man. I wonder which one you answer to in the privacy of your own thoughts." Thomas met her gaze without flinching. "Catherine, you look well for someone who was supposed to be collateral damage 12 years ago." If she was surprised by his directness, she didn't show it. "Yes, well, survival often depends on understanding when one has been betrayed. Antonio believed you stole from him and ran. I always knew there was more to the story." She gestured to a chair across from her at the conference table. "Please sit. After 12 years of hunting, I think we've earned a civilized conversation." Thomas remained standing. "Where is he, Catherine?" Her eyebrow arched. "Direct as always. That was something Antonio appreciated about you. No wasted words." She pressed a button on the table, and a wall panel slid aside to reveal a large monitor. With another button press, the screen flickered to life, showing a holding cell where a man sat on a narrow bed, his back to the camera. "Gabriel has been our guest for approximately 72 hours, Catherine said, "extracted from the life you built for him in that charming little Oregon coastal town. Fishing boat captain, wasn't it? Rather poetic for a man who spent decades swimming with sharks." Thomas kept his expression neutral, but inwardly he processed this new information. If they had found Gabriel 3 days ago, the timing aligned, with Ranger's appearance in Redemption Valley and with the escalation of outside interest in the town. "He's been uncooperative," Catherine continued, studying Thomas for reactions. "Insists the key is gone, destroyed years ago. But we both know that's not true, don't we, Ghost?" "What makes you think I have it?" Thomas asked, buying time while mentally calculating how far Eleanor and the others might have progressed through the tunnel system. Catherine's laugh was genuine but cold. "Because I know you, Daniel. I know how you operate. Gabriel entrusted you with a backup, an insurance policy. You wouldn't have destroyed it, not when it represented the only leverage that's kept you both alive all these years." She leaned forward, her intensity suddenly visible beneath the polished exterior. "The digital vaults Gabriel created contain more than just evidence of Antonio's criminal enterprises. They hold the true network. Names, dates, account numbers, blackmail material, everything connecting political figures, intelligence agencies, military contractors, and financial institutions in a web that spans continents. And you want it." "Why?" Thomas asked, though he was beginning to see the picture more clearly now. "To expose it?" Catherine's smile was thin. "To control it. Information is modern currency, Daniel. More valuable than gold, more powerful than armies. Gabriel understood that. It's why he built the system in the first place, not out of some misguided notion of justice, but as a personal insurance policy that you intend to cash in. That I intend to leverage," she corrected. "There's a difference. Exposure serves no one. Control serves everyone, with the right management." Thomas moved to the window overlooking the command center, partly to assess the tactical situation outside, partly to hide his expression from Catherine's too perceptive gaze. "You've built quite an operation here," he observed. "Redemption Valley seems an unlikely headquarters." "Temporary headquarters," Catherine corrected. "A staging area for the next phase. Remote, minimal oversight, with infrastructure already in place thanks to Cold War paranoia. The perfect place to consolidate resources before expanding." She joined him at the window. "The world is changing, Daniel. Power structures are shifting. Those who position themselves correctly now will control what comes next." "And where does Gabriel fit into this new world order?" Thomas asked. "He built the system. He alone fully understands its architecture. With the key you're carrying and Gabriel's expertise, we can access the complete network. And if he refuses to cooperate?" Catherine's expression hardened. "Everyone has breaking points, even legends like the Ghost." A technician appeared at the conference room door, tablet in hand. Catherine excused herself momentarily, stepping outside to review whatever information required her attention. Through the glass, Thomas watched her expression change from irritation to concern. When she returned, her cordial demeanor had acquired a sharper edge. "It seems we have an interesting development," she said, studying Thomas with renewed intensity. "Security sensors have detected movement in the old tunnel system. 4 individuals making their way quite purposefully toward this facility." Thomas maintained his neutral expression, though inwardly he adjusted timetables. They had moved faster than expected, or perhaps been detected sooner. "Small-town curiosity seekers," he suggested. "The mine has always attracted thrill seekers." "Perhaps," Catherine said, clearly unconvinced, although the signal jammers they're carrying suggest a more sophisticated operation. Tell me, Daniel, in your 6 years tending bar at the Copper Crown, did you make allies as well as drinks? Before Thomas could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Red warning lights pulsed along corridor ceilings, and the command center erupted into controlled chaos as personnel moved to battle stations. Vincent burst into the conference room, his casual demeanor replaced by urgent professionalism. We have a breach at Junction B. Security feeds show armed intruders and a dog, some kind of specialized tactical canine. Catherine's eyes never left Thomas's face. Not curiosity seekers after all. How disappointing. Ma'am, we need to move you to a secure location, Vincent insisted. Protocol. I'm well aware of protocol, Mr. Conti. Catherine cut him off. Secure the facility, capture the intruders if possible, eliminate them if necessary. She turned back to Thomas. It seems our reunion will need to be abbreviated. A pity. I had hoped to resolve this without further bloodshed. Had you? Thomas asked, his tone making it clear he believed otherwise. A tightening around Catherine's eyes was the only indication his words had struck home. Take Mr. Blackwood to join his old friend, she instructed Vincent. Perhaps seeing each other, after all these years, will loosen both their tongues. As armed guards moved to escort Thomas from the conference room, Catherine added, "And Vincent, if his friends somehow reach this level, kill Gabriel immediately. The ghost may have sentimental attachments, but we cannot afford the same luxury." Thomas allowed himself to be led away, counting steps and memorizing turns while the facility locked down around them. The alarms continued their urgent wailing, but beneath the chaos, he felt the first stirrings of satisfaction. The pieces were in motion. The endgame had begun, and deep within the earth beneath Redemption Valley, a ghost prepared to finally complete the mission that had haunted him for 12 years. The detention level sprawled beneath even the deepest sections of the underground facility, a maze of corridors and reinforced doors designed to contain secrets as effectively as it contained people. Thomas walked between his armed escorts, his measured steps and relaxed posture, concealing the intense calculation happening behind his eyes. 3 armed guards, Vincent leading. 2 security cameras per corridor intersection, keycard access panels, requiring both physical credentials and biometric confirmation. Emergency lighting strips along the floor. Air circulation vents positioned at regular intervals, possible alternative routes if necessary. "You're mapping the place, aren't you?" Vincent asked without turning around. "Old habits die hard." Thomas offered no response. The ghost had always been economical with words, a trait he would now use strategically. They reached a heavy security door at the end of a corridor. The isolation cell beyond was reserved for high-value detainees, its walls constructed of material that blocked all signals and most sound, perfect for interrogation, perfect for disappearance. Vincent dismissed 2 of the guards, keeping only one particularly imposing man with a facial scar that suggested previous close-quarters combat. "Wait here," he instructed them. "No one enters without direct authorization. From Ms. Mercer or myself." The biometric lock disengaged with a soft hiss, and the door swung inward. Vincent gestured for Thomas to enter first, a calculated risk that showed either confidence or carelessness. Thomas stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding the cell's other occupant. Gabriel Mercer sat on the edge of a narrow cot, elbows on his knees, head bowed. 12 years had changed him substantially from the sharp-dressed financial analyst who had once moved confidently through the corridors of power. His hair had gone, completely grey. His once trim physique had thickened around the middle, and deep lines carved furrows around his mouth and eyes. When he looked up at the sound of the door, however, the keen intelligence that had made him valuable to Antonio, Castellano, and dangerous to the organization still burned in his gaze. "I told you I need more time to consider your proposal," Gabriel began, clearly expecting Catherine or one of her regular interrogators. When he registered Thomas's presence, his words died in his throat. For a long moment, the two men simply stared at each other across the 12 years that separated their last meeting. "Hello, Gabriel," Thomas said quietly. A complex sequence of emotions crossed Gabriel's face. Shock, disbelief, relief, and finally, a resigned understanding. "So," he said, his voice rougher than Thomas remembered, "they found you too." Vincent closed the door behind them, positioning himself near the exit while maintaining a careful distance from both men. "Touching reunion," he commented dryly. "I'll give you a moment to reacquaint yourselves before we get down to business." Thomas moved further into the room, taking note of Gabriel's condition. No visible injuries, but the slight stiffness in his movement suggested he'd encountered some physical persuasion during his 3 days of captivity. "You look different without the beard," Gabriel said, a ghost of his old humor surfacing. "The bartender suits you better than the enforcer ever did." "The fishing boat captain wasn't bad either," Thomas replied. "Halibut season treating you well." Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly at the coded inquiry, an old protocol they'd established for verification of identity and security status. "Catches have been lean," he answered carefully. "Too many sharks in the water lately. Message received. Security compromised. Situation hostile." "Miss Mercer believes you gentlemen have something that belongs to her," Vincent interrupted, tiring of their oblique exchange. "The key to Gabriel's digital vault. The leverage you've been holding over certain powerful people for 12 years. "Catherine never understood," Gabriel said, addressing Thomas rather than Vincent. "It was never about leverage. It was about insurance. Insurance has value only if the threat of using it remains credible," Thomas replied, moving to sit beside Gabriel on the cot, a deliberate choice that positioned Vincent in his peripheral vision, while bringing him within whispering distance of his old associate. "She found you in Oregon 3 days ago," Thomas said, "the same day a security dog named Ranger appeared in Redemption Valley." Understanding flickered in Gabriel's eyes. "Frank Cortez's operations. I suspected he was getting close, but I didn't think he'd made the connection yet." "He hadn't," Thomas confirmed. "But when Catherine's people took you, they also acquired his assets, including his trained dogs, one of which happened to be carrying a tracking device programmed to find specific biochemical signatures." "Mine," Gabriel realized. "And mine," Thomas added. "Paired targets from the Riverside operation. The dog was following his training. Find the matching scent. When he couldn't locate you, he found the next best thing." Vincent shifted impatiently. "Fascinating as this little catch-up session is, Ms. Mercer is waiting for results. The key, gentlemen, where is it?" Thomas turned slightly toward Vincent, angling his body to shield a brief hand movement from the security camera mounted in the corner. "The watch, I assume," Gabriel said, responding to Thomas's subtle signal. "You kept it all these years." "Insurance," Thomas replied with the faintest emphasis. Gabriel nodded almost imperceptibly. "I always wondered if you'd use it, if you'd finally decide the truth needed to come out." "Some truths are destabilizing," Thomas said. "Best kept hidden until the right moment. And you think this is that moment?" There was genuine curiosity in Gabriel's question. Vincent pushed away from the wall, his patience visibly thinning. "Enough. The watch, Mr. Blackwood. Miss Mercer knows you have it." "Of course she does," Thomas replied calmly. "Just like she knows what's really in those digital vaults Gabriel created." "And what would that be?" Vincent asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Names," Gabriel said quietly. "Dates, transaction records, evidence linking dozens of supposedly legitimate enterprises to black operations that would shock even the most cynical observer. The kind of information that makes people disappear," Thomas added. Vincent's smile held no warmth. "Like Jesse Jenkins? Eleanor's missing husband who got too curious about what was happening beneath his town?" The confirmation of Eleanor's suspicions hit Thomas like a physical blow. though he allowed no reaction to show on his face. "How many others?" he asked softly. "More than you'd think," Vincent replied, "but fewer than you might fear. Most people respond appropriately to subtler pressure, financial problems, family emergencies, health issues. It's remarkable how quickly troublesome inquiries cease when personal crises arise." A distant boom interrupted the conversation, vibrating through the floor beneath them. The lights flickered momentarily before stabilizing. Vincent's hand went immediately to his earpiece. "Report," he demanded, then listened intently to information Thomas couldn't hear. "It seems your friends are more resourceful than anticipated," Vincent said after a moment, his calm demeanor showing its first cracks. "They've breached the lower access tunnels. Impressive, considering the security measures in place." Thomas exchanged a quick glance with Gabriel, a mutual recognition passing between them. The plan was proceeding, perhaps not exactly as designed, but proceeding nonetheless. "Now," Vincent continued, drawing his sidearm, "I think we've reached the portion of our discussion where more direct persuasion becomes necessary." He aimed the weapon at Gabriel's knee, a target selected for maximum pain, with minimal risk to the asset's overall value. "The watch, Mr. Blackwood, now!" Thomas raised his hands slowly, a gesture of compliance that masked the precise tension building in his muscles. "In my jacket pocket," he said. "Left side." "Retrieve it slowly," Vincent instructed. "Any sudden movements, and Mr. Mercer experiences firsthand why I was Antonio's preferred interrogation specialist before you came along." Thomas reached carefully into his pocket, extracting the antique pocket watch. The gold case gleamed dully in the cell's harsh lighting, its weight familiar in his palm after 12 years of carrying it daily. "Open it," Vincent commanded. "You should know something first," Thomas said, making no move to comply. Vincent's finger tightened fractionally on the trigger. "I'm not interested in last-minute negotiations." "It's not a negotiation," Thomas replied evenly. "It's a warning. The watch is paired to Gabriel's biometric signature. Opening it triggers a verification sequence. If the wrong person attempts to access the embedded chip, or if it's accessed under duress, the data self-destructs." Vincent's expression suggested he was calculating the probability that Thomas was bluffing. "Catherine has people who can bypass such measures," he said finally. "Catherine knows better," Gabriel interjected. "I built systems for Antonio that even the best federal cryptographers couldn't crack. Do you really think I'd create something less secure for my own insurance policy?" Another explosion sounded, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable pop of gunfire. The lights flickered again, and alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Vincent's hand went to his earpiece again, his expression darkening as he received new information. "It seems your friends have acquired assistance," he told Thomas. "Several of our security personnel appear to be switching sides." Thomas allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "Not everyone who works in a place like this believes in what it stands for." "Idealism," Vincent scoffed. "A luxury for people who've never had to make hard choices. Like the choice to disappear people who ask inconvenient questions," Gabriel asked, steel entering his voice. "Like Jesse Jenkins?" Vincent's attention shifted momentarily to Gabriel, a fraction of a second's distraction, but for men of Thomas's training, sometimes a fraction was enough. His movement was fluid and explosive, a precise strike targeting Vincent's gun hand, followed by a sweeping leg, maneuver that disrupted the man's balance. Vincent countered with impressive speed, using his free hand to deflect Thomas's follow-up strike while attempting to create distance to bring his weapon to bear. Gabriel, despite his years away from conflict, reacted with surprising efficiency, lunging forward to grip Vincent's gun wrist. The three men struggled in a deadly tableau of leverage and technique, Vincent's professional training matching against Thomas's specialized skills and Gabriel's desperate determination. The gun discharged, the sound deafening in the confined space. The bullet struck the ceiling, sending fragments of material raining down upon them. Thomas executed a precision strike to Vincent's throat, not hard enough to crush the windpipe, but sufficient to disrupt breathing and disorient. As Vincent gasped and staggered, Thomas wrenched the weapon free, reversing its orientation in one smooth motion. "Down!" he ordered, voice returning to the commanding tone that had once made him feared in circles where fear was currency. Vincent, recovering quickly despite the blow, assessed his options and made the professional's choice. He sank to his knees, hands raising to shoulder height. "You won't make it out of here," he said, voice raspy from the throat strike. "The facility is locked down. Every exit is secured. Catherine has contingency plans for contingency plans." Thomas used Vincent's own belt to secure his hands behind his back, then improvised a gag from the man's tailored shirt. "That's the difference between us," Thomas told him as he worked. "You're still thinking about exits. I'm thinking about entrances." He turned to Gabriel, who was examining the watch with a mixture of reverence and apprehension. "You actually kept it," Gabriel said wonderingly. "All these years." "I made a promise," Thomas replied simply. "And the bartender keeps his promises, doesn't he?" Gabriel's smile held a sadness that suggested he understood exactly what Thomas had sacrificed to honor that commitment. Thomas retrieved Vincent's security credentials and earpiece, then checked the corridor through the cell's small observation window. "The guard's still there," he reported, one man armed, looking nervous. "And behind him?" Gabriel asked. Thomas's smile was cold and precise. The ghost's smile, not the bartender's. "Chaos," he said. "Just what we need." In another part of the facility, Ranger burst through a ventilation duct with explosive force, landing atop a startled security technician and bearing him to the ground. The dog's training was evident in his precision, incapacitating without killing, creating an opening for the humans following behind. Halstead emerged from the duct next, dropping into a tactical crouch with his weapon raised. Maya followed, medical kit already open, as she assessed the unconscious technician. Eleanor and Lily came last, the older woman moving with surprising agility for her age, the younger compensating for inexperience with fierce determination. "Control room secured," Halstead announced, checking the bank of monitors that displayed camera feeds from throughout the facility. "Looks like our diversion worked. Most of the security personnel are responding to the explosions in the East Quadrant." The diversion had been Eleanor's contribution to the plan, Jesse's cached explosives hidden years ago as part of his personal insurance policy against the people who had taken over his town. Small charges, strategically placed where they would create maximum confusion with minimal structural damage. "There," Lily said, pointing to one of the screens. "Detention level. That's Thomas." The camera showed Thomas and another man, presumably Gabriel Mercer, subduing a guard outside what appeared to be a cell. Thomas moved with lethal efficiency, his fighting style nothing like the careful, measured movements of the bartender they knew. "He's heading for the central elevator," Halstead observed. "That matches our rendezvous plan. But he's got company coming," Eleanor warned, indicating another monitor where armed security teams were converging on the detention level. "Too many to fight through." Maya studied the facility schematic they'd uploaded to a tablet. "There's an emergency stairwell between his position and the elevator. If he can reach it before they cut him off, he'll need help," Lily said firmly. Halstead nodded, already moving toward the door. "Eleanor, stay here with Maya. Use the security systems to run interference, lock doors, reroute patrols, whatever. You can manage." "And what about Catherine Mercer?" Eleanor asked, her hands already moving across the control console with surprising competence. "She's the head of the snake." "Find her," Halstead ordered. "Then guide us to her. This ends tonight." He turned to Lily. "You stay too. Help them coordinate." "With all due respect, Sheriff," Lily interrupted, checking her borrowed utility belt with grim determination. "I didn't come this far to sit at a desk. Ranger knows me. He'll respond better with a familiar voice. Halstead started to object, then saw the unwavering resolve in the young woman's eyes. He recognized the look, the same one he'd seen in soldiers who discovered something worth fighting for. "Stay behind me," he said finally. "No heroics. We get Thomas. And Gabriel, then we extract. Understood?" Lily nodded sharply, and Ranger moved to her side, alert and ready. As they prepared to leave, Maya caught Halstead's arm. "Sheriff," she said quietly, "you should know. The medical supplies in my kit include more than just treatment options." Her meaning was clear. The veterinarian had come prepared not just to heal, but to harm, if necessary. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Halstead replied. Her meaning was clear. The veterinarian had come prepared not just to heal, but to harm, if necessary. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Halstead replied. Eleanor, monitoring the security feeds, suddenly straightened. "I've found Catherine," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "And she's not alone." On the central monitor, Catherine Mercer stood in what appeared to be a massive server room, surrounded by banks of computer equipment. Beside her, looking considerably worse for wear but unmistakably alive, was Jesse Jenkins. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she touched the image of her husband's face. "He's alive," she whispered. "All this time." "Leverage," Maya said grimly. "They kept him as insurance against you asking too many questions." "Well," Eleanor's expression hardened into something that shared DNA with Thomas's earlier transformation. "I think it's time we answered some of those questions, don't you?" Halstead nodded grimly, then led Lily and Ranger toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back to the two women who had suddenly become their tactical operations center. "Guide us in," he said, "and be ready to bring this whole place into the light. Whatever happens, no more shadows. Not in our town." As the door closed behind them, Eleanor turned to Maya, the grieving widow and the cautious doctor now replaced by two women with a mission. "Let's burn their house down," Eleanor said, hands moving across the security console with grim purpose. For the first time that night, Maya's smile reached her eyes. "With pleasure." The pocket watch ticked steadily in Thomas's hand as he and Gabriel made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the detention level. The unconscious guard's security credentials had gained them exit from the cell block, but alarms still blared throughout the facility, and the sounds of conflict echoed from multiple directions. "You have people on the inside," Gabriel observed, as they paused at an intersection checking for threats. "Not intentionally," Thomas replied, consulting the facility map he'd memorized from Eleanor's documents. But it seems Jesse Jenkins wasn't the only person in Redemption Valley who resented what Catherine was building here. Gabriel glanced sharply at him. "Jenkins is alive?" According to Vincent's implications, yes. Another loose end Catherine kept, as leverage rather than eliminating. "That was always her way," Gabriel said, bitterness edging his voice. "She understood that dead men tell no tales, but living men under control tell exactly the tales you want them to." They reached a security door that required higher clearance than they possessed. Thomas examined the locking mechanism, assessing options. "In the old days, you'd have had this open in 30 seconds, Gabriel commented. "In the old days, I carried specialized tools," Thomas replied. "But there's more than one way to open a door." He located a ventilation panel near the floor, quickly removing the cover. "Maintenance access runs parallel to most primary corridors," he explained. "Standard design in facilities like this provides service access without disrupting regular operations, or offers a convenient alternative route for someone who knows the layout," Gabriel added, already moving to follow Thomas into the cramped space. As they crawled through the dusty confines of the maintenance tunnel, Gabriel spoke. Quietly. "Why now, Thomas? After 12 years of hiding, why risk everything?" Thomas paused, considering the question. Because some debts can't remain unpaid forever. The mission, Gabriel surmised. The real one, not Antonio's version. The evidence you collected wasn't just about criminal enterprises, Thomas said. It was about a system that allowed those enterprises to operate with impunity, a shadow network that valued power above accountability. And you think exposing it now will make a difference? I think the truth matters, Thomas replied simply. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it's dangerous. They reached another access panel, this one opening into a corridor near the central elevator shaft. Thomas paused before removing it, listening for movement beyond. You've changed, Gabriel. Observed. The ghost I knew followed orders, completed missions. He didn't philosophize about truth and accountability. The ghost died at Riverside, Thomas said. The bartender is who I became after. And who are you now? Gabriel asked. Thomas considered the question as he carefully removed the panel, checking that the corridor beyond was momentarily clear. I'm the man who's going to finish what we started 12 years ago, he said finally, with or without the watch. They emerged into the corridor just as the elevator doors at the far end opened. Thomas tensed, ready for confrontation, then relaxed. Fractionally as Ranger bounded out, followed closely by Sheriff Halstead and surprisingly Lily. Cavalry's here, Thomas said with grim satisfaction, right on schedule. Dawn broke over Redemption Valley with the gentle indifference of a world unaware that beneath its surface, lives had been irrevocably changed. The abandoned Black Ridge mine stood silent against the brightening sky, its weathered structures offering no hint of the night's events. Yellow police tape fluttered at its perimeter, the only visible evidence that something significant had occurred. In the quiet back room of Myers Veterinary Clinic, Thomas Cole sat alone, his expression unreadable as he turned the antique pocket, watch over in his hands. The watch now bore a crack across its face, a permanent record of its journey through chaos. Like its owner, it had survived, but not without scars. Outside, vehicles with federal markings moved through Redemption Valley's streets. Teams of agents in tactical gear and suits conducted interviews, collected evidence, and secured locations throughout the town. The operation that had begun in secrecy now unfolded in the harsh light of official scrutiny. The door opened, and Sheriff Halstead entered, his uniform disheveled, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. He carried 2 cups of coffee, placing one silently before Thomas. It's over, Halstead said, settling heavily into a chair opposite Thomas. Federal marshals just finished collecting the last of the hard drives from level 14. The entire facility is being documented and shut down. Thomas nodded, but remained silent, his fingers tracing the watch's damaged face. Catherine Mercer is in federal custody, Halstead continued, along with Vincent Conti and 32 others. Judge Harmon and Mayor Collins were taken to Phoenix for questioning. Agent Reeves apparently tried to claim he was running a deep cover operation, but the evidence Gabriel provided made that story fall apart pretty quickly. At the mention of Gabriel, Thomas finally looked up. How is he? Stable. Maya says he'll recover fully with time. The FBI has him under protective custody at the regional hospital. They're arranging for his testimony to be recorded before he enters witness protection. Again, Thomas's expression softened slightly. And the others? Eleanor's with the federal prosecutors now, going through Jesse's records. Turns out he'd documented a lot more than anyone realized. Lily's statement has been taken. She's back at the Copper Crown, insisting on opening for the evening shift like nothing happened. Halstead shook his head with grudging admiration. That girl's got steel in her spine. And Ranger, a rare smile crossed Halstead's face. Currently napping under Maya's desk after enjoying the biggest breakfast she could prepare. FBI K-9 unit. Tried to recruit him, but Maya told them in rather colorful terms where they could shove their offer. Thomas nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before fading. And the digital vaults? Gabriel's insurance policy? Halstead's expression turned grave. The FBI cyber team is going through it now. They're saying it's unprecedented. Names, dates, account numbers, recorded conversations. Government officials, military contractors, intelligence operatives, banking executives, all connected to a shadow operation that's been running for decades. The arrests we've seen so far are just the beginning. Thomas absorbed this information, silently, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. They want to talk to you, Halstead added. The FBI, Justice Department, probably half a dozen intelligence agencies. You're the last living witness to the original Riverside operation, and with the evidence Gabriel preserved— I know, Thomas interrupted quietly. They're offering immunity, Halstead continued. Full witness protection, new identity, clean slate. In exchange for your testimony, Thomas's laugh held little humor. Another new name, another small town, another bar to tend maybe. Is that so bad? Halstead asked. You seem to find some peace here, at least for a while. Thomas finally set the watch down on the table between them, its broken face catching the morning light. Did I? Or was I just hiding, waiting for the past to catch up? These 6 years in Redemption Valley, was that living or just existing? Halstead considered this. You made a difference here. Ask Lily. Ask Eleanor. Hell, ask Ranger, the man who stood in that tunnel last night, facing down Catherine Mercer's security team to protect this town. That wasn't someone just going through the motions. Before Thomas could respond, the door opened again. Meyer entered, looking as exhausted as Halstead, but with the satisfied air of a doctor whose patient had survived a difficult surgery. Behind her, padding silently on bandaged paws, came Ranger. The cattle dog moved directly to Thomas's side, pressing against his leg in what seemed like reassurance rather than seeking comfort. Thomas absently scratched behind the dog's ears, the gesture now natural and unthinking. Your friend is awake, Meyer said, pouring herself coffee. He's asking for you, says there are things only you would understand about what happens next. Thomas nodded, unsurprised. Gabriel always did think 3 moves ahead. The feds are arranging. Transport, Halstead added. You've got about 2 hours before they want you both on a secure flight to Washington. 2 hours, Thomas repeated, looking around the clinic that had become their impromptu headquarters during the crisis. Just enough time. For what? Meyer asked. Thomas stood, decision made. For one last drink at the Copper Crown. I owe Eleanor and Lily a proper goodbye. The Copper Crown looked different in the morning light, somehow smaller yet more dignified, like an aging fighter whose glory days had passed, but whose strength remained. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that streamed through the windows, illuminating the worn wooden floor and highlighting the bar's honest imperfections. Lily was carefully arranging glasses behind the bar when Thomas entered, Ranger at his heels. She looked up, her young face showing the strain of the night's events, but also a new confidence that hadn't been there before. Figured you'd be halfway to a government bunker by now, she said, setting down a glass and wiping her hands on a bar towel. Not without saying goodbye, Thomas replied, taking a seat at the bar, not his usual position, strange to be on this side after 6 years. Is Eleanor around? Right here, Eleanor's voice came from the back office. She emerged carrying a ledger, her grey hair pulled back severely, but her eyes holding a warmth that belied her businesslike demeanor. Just finishing up the real books for a change. Feels good. She set the ledger down and studied Thomas with shrewd eyes. So, the ghost is finally leaving Redemption Valley. Thomas Cole is leaving, he corrected gently. The ghost. I think he died last night, somewhere in those tunnels. Eleanor nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. She reached beneath the counter and produced a bottle, not the well, Whiskey they served to regular customers, but a rare single malt that had been saved for special occasions. Jessie always said we should open this when it was time to celebrate something truly meaningful, she said, setting out 3 glasses. I think this qualifies. As Eleanor poured, Lily moved to stand beside her, the 2 women now united by shared danger and shared purpose. What happens to the Copper Crown now? Thomas asked. It stays open, Eleanor said firmly. This town needs its gathering place more than ever, somewhere people can process what's happened, rebuild community. And you need a new bartender, Thomas observed. Lily straightened, already handled. Eleanor's giving me a shot. Thomas raised an eyebrow, impressed. From waitress to bartender, quite a promotion. She earned it, Eleanor said simply, pushing glasses toward them both. Not many would have followed you into those tunnels, knowing what we were facing. They raised their glasses in silent acknowledgement of what they'd survived together, what they'd discovered about themselves and each other in the crucible of crisis. As Thomas savored the rare whiskey, he glanced around the saloon one final time, memorizing its details. For 6 years, this place had been his refuge, his cover, and ultimately his home. Whatever came next, whatever new identity the government created for him, whatever distant town became his new refuge, he knew that part of him would remain here, preserved in the memories of those who had seen beneath his carefully constructed facade and stood by him anyway. The federal agent said something interesting while they were taking my statement, Lily mentioned, breaking the reflective silence. They said this whole operation might never have been exposed if Catherine Mercer hadn't gotten greedy. If she just let sleeping ghosts lie. She couldn't, Thomas replied. People like Catherine, they can never have enough control, enough power. The digital vaults Gabriel created were too tempting, a royal flush in the high-stakes game she was playing. And now? Eleanor asked. Now the cards are on the table, Thomas said. The names, the connections, the operations, it's all being processed by people who still believe in accountability. Some will escape justice, of course. Some always do. But the network Catherine and her associates built, it's finished. Thanks to you, Lily said. Thomas shook his head. Thanks to Jessie, who kept detailed records when he realized what was happening in his town. Thanks to Frank Cortez, who trained Ranger to find me when everything went wrong. Thanks to all of you who chose to fight, rather. Then look away. The door opened and Sheriff Halstead entered, his expression somber. Time to go, Thomas. The feds are getting antsy. Thomas nodded, draining his glass and standing. Ranger moved to his side, the dog's posture suggesting he had no intention of being left behind. About Ranger, Thomas began, but Maya cut him off. As she followed Halstead into the bar, already handled, she said. He's officially listed as a therapy animal, essential to the recovery and well-being of a federal witness. She gave a mischievous smile. Turns out I still have some pull with certain medical licensing boards. Thomas felt an unexpected pressure in his chest, not the vigilant tension that had been his constant companion for 12 years, but something warmer. It took him a moment to recognize it as gratitude. I don't know how to thank you all, he said finally. Don't thank us, Eleanor replied. Just live, really live this time. Not just existing, not just waiting for the past to catch up. The man I've watched these past 6 years, the one who looked out for Lily, who kept this town's secrets, who finally stood up when it mattered most. That man deserves a future. Even with everything that came before, Thomas asked, the question that had haunted him for 12 years finally spoken aloud. Especially because of it, Eleanor said firmly. Jessie used to say redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about what you choose to do with the time you have left. Halstead checked his watch, genuinely regretful. We really need to move. Thomas nodded, accepting the inevitable. He turned to go, then paused, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing. The antique pocket watch. He placed it carefully on the bar. "For the Copper Crown," he said, "a reminder that even broken things can serve a purpose." Eleanor picked up the watch, studying its cracked face before tucking it carefully into the cash register beneath the bar. "We'll keep it safe, just in case you ever find your way back." "Thomas Cole won't be coming back," he acknowledged, the reality of witness protection an inescapable fact. "Maybe not," Lily said with unexpected wisdom, "but whoever you become next, they'll always have a place here." With final handshakes and briefer embraces than any of them might have expected, Thomas moved toward the door, Ranger keeping perfect. And pace beside him. "One more thing," Eleanor called after him. Thomas paused, looking back at the bar that had been his home and the people who had become something like family. "Whoever you become next," she said, "make sure it's someone who remembers how to pour a proper whiskey. Seems a shame to waste all that training." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Thomas laughed, a genuine sound free from the weight of secrets. "I'll do my best." The morning sun painted Redemption Valley in honest light as Thomas and Ranger walked toward the waiting federal vehicles. Behind them stood the Copper Crown, weathered and imperfect, but still standing. Ahead lay uncertainty, the blank slate of a new identity, the challenge of building yet another life. But this time would be different. This time he wouldn't be running from the past, but moving toward something new. This time, he wouldn't be alone. As they reached the black SUV with government plates, a federal agent held the door open, eyeing Ranger with professional assessment. "The dog comes too?" the agent asked, clearly skeptical. Thomas placed a hand on Ranger's head, feeling the solid presence of the animal who had found him when he most needed finding. "We come as a package," he said, his tone making it clear this point was non-negotiable. "He's better at spotting trouble than your entire security team." The agent hesitated, then nodded. "Fair enough, we've got a long drive ahead." As Thomas settled into the vehicle, Ranger jumping confidently onto the seat beside him, he caught a final glimpse of Redemption Valley through the tinted window. The small town looked peaceful, ordinary, its extraordinary secrets once again buried beneath a veneer of normalcy. But he knew better now. He understood that beneath the surface of even the most ordinary places, remarkable truths waited to be discovered. That behind the mask of the most unremarkable bartender might hide a man capable of extraordinary courage. That redemption wasn't a destination, but a journey. One that sometimes required facing the very ghosts you'd spent a lifetime outrunning. The SUV pulled away, carrying Thomas toward whatever future waited beyond Redemption Valley. Behind him, the Copper Crown stood sentinel at the edge of town, keeper of secrets old and new, its weathered walls holding stories that would soon become local legend. And somewhere in Washington, the digital vaults Gabriel Mercer had built 12 years ago were being opened at last, their contents spilling light into dark corners that had remained shadowed for too long. The ghost was gone, but Thomas, whatever name he might carry next, was finally, after 12 long years, beginning to live. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.